Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride.
This show, sponsored by Gamer Subs. See, I've got the delicious flavour here, Mango Meta. So obviously we know James from Virtus.pro's never fucking heard of this flavour. And also, a mango is an exotic fruit, which is entirely unrelated to what I've just said. So, right, we're here on the show now. I've got Moses, my usual co-host, with me. Listen, mate, they don't even know what they're signing up for when they fucking sponsor me, baby. But listen,
I've missed this show.
I know. And also, I'll just say this. I can't explain the context, but I can guarantee you this year, this won't be the one where me and Moses like naively try and do an episode every week and then just do like one a month and then get like 6, 7. I can't explain why, but it will come, the news in the pipeline. And let me just say, there'll be a lot more episodes of this show. And we might even be able to do stuff like level the shit up. So anyway, our guest for this one, speaking of leveling up, doesn't even relate to anything really, but we'll just pretend like that's a compliment to a Pimp. It's Pimp. It's Pimp, the guy you all used to hate on desks and now you only mildly dislike.
Yeah, I guess they don't mildly dislike me. Yeah, that's a good point. It's gotten better.
Do they still go on and on about the accent? Because I've always found, like, I feel like people don't realise it's not that Danish people can't speak English. It's that it just takes a little bit of time to get used to the accent, you know, but your ear tunes into it for sure.
To be fair, I think Anders fucked it up for all of us, right? If that motherfucker...
He doesn't really have a Danish accent, does he?
That's the thing, yeah. So now people expect us not to speak with that accent. But yeah, people still want to complain about it. But
I used to get tweets with Anders being like, who's the British guy you cast with? And it's just like, he's not even British. He's Danish.
I know, exactly. Yeah. Whereas like you go and you listen to a real Dane like Device, sounds like they've got something in their throat. I don't even give a fuck, mate. I don't even give a fuck, man. Right, anyway, that's how we're starting, by the way. And if people don't know, by the way, speaking of Device, a little known fact a lot of people won't know is that one of the very, very earliest episodes of Counterpoints that I did in 2014 is actually one that no one knows about because it's the missing episode. It's when I first started recording content for myself, and the guests on that episode was Pimp and Device. And obviously Pimp at the time, I think he'd actually just gone to Copenhagen Wolves or something. I think it was around that time or something. And Device was obviously around the same period of time, same team, etc. But if people don't remember, the detail that was bizarre was because it was my first time ever recorded in OBS. Like, I didn't have it set up properly. And basically, OBS crashed. And at the time, I didn't do what I do now, which is change the file format. And it was a file that you just couldn't open. And so sadly, we recorded this like 2-hour, like fucking really good like podcast going back. So it's actually the only time Device has ever featured on my content, aside from that like intro where he says he doesn't choke anymore or whatever. Though I don't know how that'd relate to that joke earlier. So anyway, this is the mad part about it though, is in this episode, I'm almost low-key glad it didn't come out actually, because this is, when the timing of it was, no joke, was like 2 weeks before Kaylee got banned. And I had an argument with Device where I was telling him like, oh, LDLC, nah, they might look good now because they've got all the skill, but Titan's going to be the #1 team. And I made some mad bet with him, which I obviously didn't fucking put like a caveat on, which I should have done. Like, obviously it has to be this lineup, where I said like, you know, in the next 5 tournaments, they're going to win way more of them than fucking, you know, like, than LDLC. And the worst thing is, dude, they won the first one, that DreamHack Stockholm, and I was thinking, oh, fucking hell, this is going to be beautiful. And then obviously after that, like, Kaylee got banned, like the LDLC wins the major, like becomes the #1 team. But luckily the video was deleted for history. Sadly, not by me. The gods took care of that one, boys. So anyway, Pimp's back. Right, obviously we're going to talk about IEM Katowice, but if you know how we do this show, we're not just 3 people just interviewing another person and awkwardly trying to come up with questions and laugh at reading Twitch chat. Other people do that better than us. What we like to do is analyse the teams, talk about them, talk about the context. So we're not only going to talk about Katowice, but I thought it'd be a great way as like a kicking off point for a whole bunch of these teams, because to me, it was like the biggest event in quite a while, even by sheer size. Like obviously Blast Global Finals was amazing, but that was a finals. You had to qualify to it. Even just the playing part, man, the amount of teams competing in this was nuts. Like there was even some names that people don't realise didn't even make it into the tournament. So I think we can go everywhere on this one. So let's start just where everyone was hyped, right? Which is all those CIS teams that made it deep. I mean, I will say, just as a random aside, right? Before we go into like Spirit, Gambit, VP, we must talk about VP, sadly. They're doing that thing where, because they keep winning games most, now I like have to talk about them, you know, like I try my best to avoid them, but at that point in time, like you've got to give the devil his due, you know. So here's the problem is, before we talk about them, let's just talk about Na'Vi first, because that's one angle I think's weird that people don't really seem to touch on enough, which is, if it is about the CIS region being godlike and the CIS is on top now, shouldn't Na'Vi be winning the fucking tournament then? Like, not only that, Na'Vi even dusted off VP in this tournament. Like, I thought they were going to win the tournament. So one of the things I've always found weird, I want to get your take on it actually, is basically I've noticed this. So Na'Vi, obviously, this whole online period has had these weird results against teams from their domestic region, even as, the next week they'll beat like fucking Astralis in like a best of 3. I wonder, obviously the classic statement we always make about CIS teams, also because usually we don't know them, is like, oh, the style of play is really going to be unpredictable, so, these European teams won't be ready for what hit them. Well, the problem is, I think that applies to Na'Vi even, because if anything, I could use a logic like the fact that Na'Vi's so good at playing the EU meta of those teams and beating them, I think in some fucked up way makes them like an EU team, and then they just lose to the CIS teams as well. Like, Pimp, do you have any thoughts on what's going on here? Because on paper, if they're the best CIS team by default, shouldn't they be winning?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Na'Vi is a CIS team though. I think you're spot on when you're saying that they've been playing against European teams for such a long period, right? They've only been competing, especially when it was LAN only, right? They only competed at big European LAN events. So when they had to go into the online period, you saw the results. You saw them constantly struggle in the minors of the CIS region. They were dog shit, right? Let's be honest. They weren't doing a good enough job at that point. So I think you're right. There was a period of time where they had to establish themselves and figure out how to deal with that aspect. They used that excuse as, okay, it's online Counter-Strike, we can't perform.
Yes.
They will always look back at the IEM Katowice for last year when they were playing, a fantastic Counter-Strike. But I feel you're right when you're saying that Na'Vi is not, in my book, they're not a CIS team. They're a European team who have been competing against the European top teams for 3 or 4 years, at least with the core of those players. And by then to go into the CIS region and play against the Gambits, play against the VPs and whatever else the fucking call in there it's a different task for them. So I think that's spot on, Na'Vi to me is not a CIS team, they're a European team and they didn't do well enough.
Come on, Moses.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Is I think Na'Vi playing so much with the European teams over the years and the North American teams and being in like the more global competition, while these guys have the other teams have just risen through the ranks of pure CIS. I think there's just different aspects of their gameplay now to where, Na'Vi's a CIS team, but they have a lot of European, they have a lot of like of the more standard, tendencies that we're used to playing against. And I think that's the big strength is you kind of hit it there when you play a team like VP and Spirit and Gambit. The play style is just so different, and it takes away, I think, a lot of the strengths that pro teams have developed playing against each other. So there is an uncomfortable factor when you go up against these teams for a variety of reasons. And Na'Vi doesn't have that quality to them because they've been kind of in the same climate and the same environment as us, competing at these events for years as the rest of the team. So yeah, there's some cool things that VP and Gambit both do, Spirit as well, that make them pretty weird teams to play against, pretty tough teams to beat.
One of the things I have to say that I think's pretty nuts is like every time Na'Vi wins a tournament and looks good and they're beating the best teams in the world, obviously they had that amazing streak where they would win, like 10 plus series in a row or something versus all the best teams. When they look good, right, the problem is this is a team where maybe it's because obviously their best player can be the absolute best player to ever play when he's playing on his peak form. When they're on form, right, it's like we all just forget the 3 months before. We're all like, you know what? I think this could be an era. This is fucking sick, this. And I can't even lie, because I'm as bad at this. The second they lose, I'm like one of those like mad NFL fans in like Monday morning, Moses, because I want every motherfucker cut. I want everyone except Simple cut from the team. Like I rage. I'm mild out of control because I'm just like, and even though before I'm like, you know what? I guess Boomich sort of works, and I mean, Perfecto is doing his job in a way, and Flame Dogger, every now and then he contributes. But the second they fail, I'm like, Flamey, get the fuck out of this team. You've been in the team for 3 years. What are you doing? And also, Perfecto, get some kills, mate. Boomich, it's not enough to just do fucking memes. You have to be like, what does everyone else think? Like, where do you come down here? Like, obviously we know there's a problem where they can't necessarily get players. I mean, they've even sort of hinted at it, like they're just gonna have to take one of their own academy players if they get another one. Like, it's not like they can necessarily go and just get Shiro and fucking Dexter and all these people, that like a fan would say. But do you think Na'Vi, should they make changes, Moses?
I mean, look, as someone in the scene now, I don't think I can actually say that another team can make changes as a coach competing against these guys.
Okay.
I have to step away from that side of things. But I will say, I think the reason it's so weird kind of evaluating Na'Vi from the outside is because they have had Simple performing so consistently for so long, and they play good Counter-Strike. So the only thing left is to look at the players. Like that's been the thing we've said about Na'Vi for 2 years is if Electronic can deliver and if Flamey can deliver. So when you see them have games and it works out, it looks amazing. But then otherwise you're just like back to it. Like the strats they run are good. The tactics they run are good. It gets them things. There's obviously some mistakes and some messiness here and there, as there is with every single team. But usually we pin Na'Vi down to individuals not performing up to their peak as to why they're not winning more events. And I think that's why it's so frustrating, because you want to get on that bandwagon. You're like, finally, they can get going with this. And then obviously that drop-off happens and it looks like complete hell. So yeah, they're a tough team. But as to roster changes, I don't even know where they'd go. Didn't they try that recently? And they were even just thrown away by the buyout figures that were there, and now it's going to be even harder. I think it's the problem when you're a team like Navi or any team that's in like the top 5 really in the world who's in a position to compete for trophies is. Any roster change you make is like you have 2 options. You go out and get someone who's already been experienced and bring them in that you know is going to be good, that can deliver in certain areas, and you bring him up to speed in your system, but you trust in his experience. Or you go and get a young guy who's probably got way more talent and way more long-term potential, but it's going to be a pain in the ass and it's going to hurt you in the short term when you kind of try and bring them up to your level. So for someone like Navi, there's no good answer.
Like Team Liquid.
Yeah, exactly. Best of both worlds.
And also, to be fair, actually, Moses, it does make a lot of sense. You're totally... Actually, you know what? You see a lot of promise in this Navi lineup. I think it should keep the exact same lineup, right? It was working out pretty well.
Yeah, I'd keep going.
It's a pretty exciting match.
Yeah, I think you should probably use Bit a little bit more. Maybe bring him in on a couple of the maps.
Yeah, you know what? Simple shouldn't play every map. Come on, that's just unreasonable. Let's show the power of the rest of the team. Come on then, Pimp. What do you think, mate?
Do you know how fucking boring it is to do a disc segment with Navi every single time? Because it's the same story every single time, right? You talk about Simple, you talk about Electronic, and then you pray and you hope that at some game, Perfecto will play well, or maybe Boomers is having a great tournament, and Flame is not going to shit the bed once in a while, and that's it. You digest it to that just being the talking points every single time. I don't know if you remember, Thorin, but last year at Katowice, when we saw Navi play that well, they won the tournament. The last thing I said at the disc segment was that let's wait and see what happens next tournament. Unfortunately, we didn't get the next tournament right, because it's the same story over and over again with Navi. When they look good, they look like they have the highest peak in the world of Counter-Strike. I don't even think Astralis, when they were at their best, can do anything to deal with Simple and Electronic when they're playing the way they are. They actually look very good. They look solid. As Jason said, they have good strats, they have good defaults, but it comes down to the individuals to perform. And sometimes you don't even need Perfected to do anything. You don't even need Boomers to do anything, because you have Simple on your lineup. You have Electronic on your lineup. I said the same thing after we saw them won the Blast Global Finals. They were looking solid. They were looking good. Just wait and see next tournament. It'll be another roller coaster, and it's the same thing over and over again. Why that is, I don't know. I was trying to poke a little bit with it when it comes to Simple, when it comes to the dynamics of the team. Maybe there needs to be space for other players than just Electronic and Simple to be a more well-rounded team in modern days of Counter-Strike. I think that's an interesting talking point. Unfortunately, not something you could say at all unless you want to get dealt with by the CS community all day long. I'm doing right now. They freaking hate me over there. But apart from that, Navi is the most boring top team I've ever had to cover as an analyst with the same talking points over and over again. And to answer your question, yes, they do need roster changes. And something needs to change. It's been the same case for the last 2 years. Sure thing, if you want to be the occasional upset team who once in a while can be the top 1 team, once in a while can win a tournament, go ahead of yourself. But if you want to win majors every single time you turn up, if you're Simple and you're the best player to ever touch the game, and your ambition is not to win every single major you participate in, then what the fuck is the point even to begin with? So yes, something needs to change.
I mean, I'll even say as well, that's the old classic Pimp on stream curse just hitting us all again. Like, the last thing this motherfucker said at Katowice was like, but anyway, let's watch out for the next lands, guys. It's like, right, and all lands are cancelled forever. Like, fuck Pimp, why have you done it? No, why? And then also, I have to say, I know obviously we won't do the whole discussion like you said about that thing that people went mental on, but I will touch on that briefly, which is this. In a way, I know what you mean by that, or I agree in a different way on the same point, which is this, right? One of the reasons, I'm going to do a piece of content about it soon, that I actually think Simple is I already thought it was the GOAT just from what he did before, but the stuff he's actually been doing the last 6 months, I think he's leveled up even more, mate. Some of the shit he's doing on CT sides, where he essentially just plays whatever spot he wants based on reading the game. That looks brilliant, right? It's wow, look, and the team can create space. I don't think he does that. I think he literally just takes the game by the scruff of the neck and is right, I'm going to your position now. You move over, you rotate now. Listen, that's well and good in one game. If that was a story that you did in a semi-final just to win one match, it'd be a cool anecdote. If you're doing that all the time, it actually suggests to me the team dynamic isn't very well set up. Basically what you're saying, Simple, with your actions is the player who plays that spot isn't fucking capable of playing it, hence you have to rotate and take his spot. So to me, I think the real problem with Navi is this, is people use the logic, but if Simple's so good, why don't they wait? It's the other way around, mate. If he really is the absolute GOAT, and we're not talking some sports where it's you're just the best player. The reason we call him the GOAT is because it's his bad games are a good game for a fucking 10th best player. So as a result, if you're having those performances, and then you don't win the tournament. If anything, I think you are sort of like, you're covering some of the weaknesses. Like, people would be way harsher. I think I said on Twitter when they got eliminated, mate, put any other player not called Simple in there who's from the CIS. Any of them. Take all the ones you've been loving now in VP. Put Yekindar there, put Dexter there, put Shiro there. Tell you what, Na'Vi, I think they'd be like 11th best team in the world.
Sure, but that's the whole point of it, and I think Jason can maybe even chime in, right? If you have a player who's as good as Simple is, and he feels the need to cover all the time, if he feels the need that when you look towards your Perfecto, you look towards your Flamey, you as Simple, you don't think he's good enough to hold up to his own, so you're constantly trying to be there in the gaps, right? You're constantly trying to play his spot or help him out, and you do that all the time. You can't do that on a consistent basis. I will say this again, and that's why I find this conversation interesting, and I would love to hear Jason takes on it as well, right? But there's a world, in my book at least, where Simple would be better off not being in Na'Vi, or Simple would be in Na'Vi with players that he actually trusts to do the job. Right now, it's a clear sign for me, and Jason could probably attest to that, right? If Thooorin would play the same way as Simple did, if Thooorin had the skill to do it first and foremost right now, but if Thooorin would play the same way, that would suggest that he didn't trust the team. He didn't trust the system. He didn't trust whatever was supposed to happen or whatever they planned according to that game. So Simple being able to level up and be that player who can, take over an entire game on a CT side or take over an entire game on the T side. I agree with you. He's leveled up. He's a much more explosive player, and the fact that he can do that, for a potential semi-final or final in the future is cool. But as long as Simple don't trust his teammates around him, or as long as they are not good enough to basically facilitate him being the best player in the world, again, what is the point? You can be an upset team, but you can never be consistently the best team in the world, and that's a problem for me. So there is a world in my book where Simple is better off playing in a team or playing on a roster where he trusts the teammates more, or where the teammates understand the needs of Simple better than Na'Vi is doing right now.
Yeah, I think. There's a little bit of that, but I don't see it in the same way as like him rotating around the map and playing his teammates' positions, because I think that's something an Opper just kind of has to do across the map. It's one of the strengths of being able to have a mobile Opper who can mop up different locations on the map, and so you keep your position unknown, and maybe your opponents try and go ramp one round, and all of a sudden you're there with an AWP, and the next time they want to go ramp, they maybe second guess it a little bit. I think sometimes I see that lack of trust in the fight selections that he takes, and like how long he sticks around to fight more, or does he go for that third kill? Like, we know he's good enough to get it, but that's the question, is during an execute, how much does he feel he has to do before he can actually safely retake the bomb site or back away and play the team game instead? And that's where I think sometimes he gets caught. And look, I don't know who to necessarily criticize if it is like a trust issue within the team. I don't actually know, but I mean, you have to admit too, like, his teammates do sometimes give him a reason to not necessarily trust them. Like, the performances are just so up and down that you can kind of understand why he sometimes he maybe tries to do a little bit too much. I can't say the hardest part about playing Na'Vi is knowing that even if you outplay the team, Simple can still just be you. Like, Simple is like one out of maybe two players that I consider in the scene when we go up against them where I'm just like, fuck, I have to play against these two guys who can just automatically win. And the other one is not ZywOo, it's Device. It's Device and Simple. Those are the two individuals that scare the shit out of me in terms of preparation, because no matter how much you prepare, no matter how good of a game plan you have, those guys can beat you single-handedly. And ZywOo can do it too. I just think he does it less.
I just think his experience means he just doesn't have the same logic of like, I'm going to take over the game. Like, this is Mark. He just plays his spot, I think. I see what you mean with the analogy.
Yeah.
But that's the perspective, right? As a coach, yeah. It's just as a coach and as an opponent to Simple, that must be infuriating, right? That must be annoying as hell to know that at any given time, Simple could just take over the game and all the prep you've done doesn't matter at that point. But from his point of view, right, for Simple to feel that I need to take over the game, because my team will most likely get outplayed whenever we face an Astralis, or whenever we face a well-prepared Vitality or whatever that may be. You can just imagine as a player what kind of dynamic that is creating within the team when Simple already prematurely is maybe subconsciously in the mindset that I need to take over the game because my team is going to get outplayed here no matter what when they face Astralis. That's why I think he's the greatest player of all time. That's why I agree. I think he's leveled up, and my critique was never of Simple as a player, but of the fact that he was supposed to do that. Like, he's now supposed to level up, and he's supposed to take over the game by himself and accept the fact that his team gets outplayed by whoever opponent is well prepared enough, because the rest of the team is not good enough at holding up. I don't think that's a sustainable, future for Simple or for Na'Vi for that matter.
Yeah, it probably depends on like when it starts. And again, I don't have any insight into Na'Vi, but like, for instance, I know against Vitality, I want my star player. I want Elige to do exactly what he did, which is in the last 4 rounds of the game, he got I think a triple kill every single round. He just was crazy aggressive, took over, and he said, I'm just going to go kill everything that shows up on my screen in this part of the map. And you think you want that as out of your star player, and you want them to be able to close things out like that, but the team has to be able to get you to the position to do it. If you're trying to do that from round 1, you're going to make too many mistakes. If you try and do it for the select, last 3-4 rounds, that's doable.
Right, let's do it then. Let's dive into some of these other teams. Let's start with the winners, Gambit, who actually, this is the funny thing about this tournament. Listen, I get, especially if you work in the tournament, you get into the hype of the teams and the storyline, and then the storyline builds. It's like a pressure cooker, And so if a team like this, I remember they did a lower bracket run as well, because they got beaten bizarrely by, I think it was EG. So they did this mad lower bracket run, obviously came to the playoffs. Then in the playoffs, they win the final. It was looking fucking easy in the final. When you win in that fashion, we can talk all day long about the potential. Listen, everyone knows online they were monsters against CIS teams, online qualifiers and stuff. They had this great streak when they were Gambit youngsters coming into Gambit where they chucked Hobbit in. But the thing that I found really kind of fucked is people have got to you've got to keep your narratives. It's like the fucking streams in Ghostbusters. You can't just be crossing them all the time. You've got to keep them separate. So here's the problem. If you were all going to tell me that VP, who obviously they won Flashpoint, they won the IEM New York CIS, they had that streak of wins. If you're going to tell me VP's the next top team, okay, you know what? There's some basis there. I can start to get on board. They've done it, consistency. If you're going to tell me Spirit, who's been blasting away for even with the old lineup, they were very good. If you go back a year, if you're going to tell me they have all these hot young aimers, the potential, that's great. But it's y'all weren't even talking about Gambit aside from as a maybe in the future thing. So people are going to crown this team now because they've won this tournament. But I have to say, this will sound like haterism because everyone's on the hype train now. Aside from the final, which was some sort of really weird counter as far as I can tell, even map pool wise, they seem to counter VP. Aside from that game, mate, I watched a lot of games of them in this tournament where it was they're barely winning these matches. Shiro goes fucking mental, statistically out of the world, and then they win 16-12 on each of the maps, I didn't actually, I was actually shocked aside from the inexperience of the players and the novelty of the narrative as to why people were sort of all in on Gambit. Where are you on this, Pimp?
I think they play good Counter-Strike. I think they play really good Counter-Strike, and obviously they do since they win a tournament of this caliber. I do get what you're saying, right? But you're an example of a fun example against Spirit. They won 16-11, 16-13. I do believe on both maps they were up 15-7 or 15-4 on Inferno as well, for that matter. So they were looking much, much better than their opposition, but they showed, flaws of not being able to close out the games and make the games closer than they were supposed to be. But at least from what I saw, from my point of view, they were the better team in every single game they had during Katowice. I think they played some brand solid Counter-Strike, and I think we talk about Navi not being a CIS team. I don't think Gambit played a CIS brand of Counter-Strike. I think they played much more smart. I think they played much more together, and I think Hobbit has had a much more impactful return to Gambit than some people you give him. I also do believe that the peak we saw from Gambit reminds me of Heroic. The way you just phrased it right here. No one was talking about Heroic until they all of them were the best team in the world. And you saw what happened. They stay on top for a couple of months and then they fall back to now be 11, 12, whatever. They're not going to be a top 10 team for the future being. I don't think so. Same for Gambit, right? I think there's some very interesting players with there. Shiro being one of them. Exile, the whole story of him coming from, the U team, going to the main Gambit roster, then not being good enough back then, going back, in rough circumstances, and then getting a second breath of fresh air here for Gambit is a cool story. Hobbit, all of a sudden playing better than we've seen the last 3 years. Where did that come from? It's hard to believe that that's going to continue, but I will say from what I saw in this tournament, there was a lot of building stones in the way they played Counter-Strike. A lot of the fundamentals they were doing very, very well. Even in the games where you so rightfully said they weren't looking like the much better team, right? They were still winning down to the basics of Counter-Strike. I don't feel it was the individuals taking over the game. I think Shiro is a fantastic player in the sense that he was having a lot of clutches, right? I think he broke the all-time clutch record in this tournament by quite a big margin. He was not that aggressive. He didn't have a lot of impact in the buy rounds as of a whole, but when he got impact, it was in the clutches. It was in the 2 versus 2s, 3 versus 3s. And I think I saw a lot of, rounds where they have very clear defined roles, and you don't see that from a team like Spirit or VP for that matter as well, which maybe is a bit of a bad example when it comes to VP. But Spirit, for example, I think they are a complete fluke. I think the individual level they have can be very, very high, but there's no foundation behind them to build upon that. But I did believe, and I do think I saw that in Gambit, and I will say that I'd be surprised if they're not a top 10 team, a top 7 to 8 team within the next 6 months as well.
Right, Moses, you obviously never played Gambit. Somehow bizarrely, despite the way the tournament went, you just never ran into them. So do you have any thoughts on them?
I only from what I've kind of gathered from playing some practice games against him. I mean, the tournament, obviously, I think Pimp laid it out pretty nicely. I think, obviously, man, the individual level that was hit by Hobbit was something fucking wild that we haven't seen in a while. And I think it kind of marks both Gambit and VP and even Spirit to a certain degree, like not criticizing anything about the gameplay or the team play or anything like that, but everything they did was powered by like incredible individual levels by like 1 to 2 players for each team. So that's just something to like keep your eye out on, right? Like if those individual levels drop off, the question is, does the team play, do the tactics, do the way they play together kind of overcome that deficit? So I thought Gambit is a cool team. I think they're a fun team to play against. They're a really frustrating team to play against. All these CIS teams have this one unique quality that their styles to play against are really, really frustrating compared to what we're kind of used to, in my opinion, from other European and teams that are normally at these events. So I think that's part of like one of the things that makes them really, really difficult to go up against. So yeah, Gambit had a good event. Obviously, incredible individual performances from a lot of people. I mean, some of the clips coming out from Nafany, I think that quad kill he had on Overpass was something freaking weird. I think that was Nafany and not Inters, but I don't know. Like these, I'd have more to say about VP because we actually went up against them.
Right.
Yeah. Gambit's tough.
I'll also say as well, like, I totally now understand how the narrative around Chiro came, like, over the last, like, year or so. It's motherfuckers who just look at the stats page. Because people were literally trying to make it sound like this is, like, he's like another Simple, it's another Ziwu. Like, mate, that's not even the way he plays. Like, you know, one of the classic things people used to try to say to hate on Simple in Na'Vi was, like, he plays too passive or he's baiting them. It's like, mate, first of all, I'd use some of those motherfuckers as bait. And secondly, he gets all the kills. Like I always used to say about Cold Zero, it's not baiting if you get the kills and win the round, you fucking idiot. Baiting's when you don't do it, when you fuck around and you don't even get the kill. But mate, that Shiro guy plays so passive. Yeah. Like, it's so funny because people only know, I feel like from the memories, like they know the Spirit style of play. They know Vega Squadron style of counter. It's like in your face, like it's all just like fucking riflers, like aggressive aimers, like just play off aim. Like they think that's CIS Counter-Strike. Like, what's interesting about Gambit is they're more in the VP wheelhouse. They're playing fucking slow as shit. Like, they actually are playing structured, I agree, Pimp. Like, they clearly have like a defined playing style.
Yeah, and the contrast between, that's the thing though, the contrast between, you know, a Shiro and a Sybil, it's big, right? You can't compare those two players. Completely different play styles, but the contrast even between Shiro and James, for example, I think Shiro have that extra layer, right? When I look towards James,
yes,
I'm annoyed as hell watching him play counters, right? Because you can always see in his body language in the game, the way he moves around, that he, you know, some rounds he just tends to believe that, okay, it's already lost, I'm just gonna preset.
He's waiting to save, isn't he? Yeah, he's
exactly.
waiting to.
He's waiting to save, right? Instead of just being a little bit proactive sometimes. I even said it on when we covered the tournament on Danish TV, right? I feel like if you could add another layer, then James could be a world-class player, but right now he's just an average good player. Like he doesn't have that extra layer. Well, I feel for Shiro, there's a reason he's involved in, was it 21 clutches he won throughout the tournament? He gets in there, right? He gets in there and he's proactive when it's a 2 versus 2. When he's clutching, he's actually moving around the map, feeling out the map. But in general, he's a very passive op player. So it's a style of op we don't see often. You know, you can low-key compared to Device, I feel, in a way where Shiro is just even more passive, but when need to be, you know, just as with Device, when need to be, they can be proactive. They can put on that extra layer to their gameplay.
Yes.
Whereas for James, you know, when he's in a 1-on-1 clutch or in a 2 versus 2, it'll have to come from the teammate, right? If the teammate is not getting the opening, then James will fall back and he'll save the AWP, and that's freaking annoying to watch, right? Whereas for Shiro, I feel he added that extra layer despite still being very, very young, and that's why I think he's a very interesting player for the future as well. I think he played well, and I think he's a player that, again, can he add more aggressiveness, more proactiveness in his overall play? I think he'd be even better than he is now.
I think people know I basically hate James' playing style. I don't know him as a person, of course. Nothing to do with that. I just absolutely despise his playing style. Not least because, like, dude, this tournament almost gave me the greatest gift ever. Where when Gambit was on map point on Overpass, they almost could have lost the round. If Gambit had planted the bomb, basically they would have had like a 4v1 against James, and he would have just like been rotating from the fucking towards the B site on Overpass. Which, if anyone's watched that team play, listen, there's other maps they're amazing on, like on Train Inferno, they can really get busy with anyone. But on fucking Overpass, James in that A site, the way he rotates is the most bullshit stuff I've ever seen. Dude, I've seen loads of rounds where he does what you're talking about. Like, he's the guy where when he gets behind that wall in the B site where you're going to look onto the site when you've rotated through lower, he's just like waiting to be like, Actually, I better save now, guys. Just like back off instantly. He doesn't need to take like the fucking peaks half the time. This guy's unbelievable. So I have to say, that's why I get why people hype Yekindar. Because in my opinion, if Yekindar's not there, all of those flaws of James just get exposed. The problem is Yekindar has the opposite playing style and strengths. And so it's like, it's really off-putting actually. Like, give us some thoughts on this, Moses. Because I have to say, I know when I was watching Flashpoint, when you're an analyst, obviously anyone could go, well, just do this, do that, do this. But obviously I don't have the tools in the game. I'm not the one actually doing what I would tell the player to do. So when I watch VP, I can't lie, I get a bit arrogant and think, surely they can shut this stuff down. Like, come on, even Yekindar, you could bait him into stuff like James, like, let's use his passivity against him.
I saw your
but I have to say, dude, I've seen a lot of teams that I know are cerebral, coaches that I know watch the demos. It must be one of the hardest teams to actually like apply what you fucking study, because they look really tough to figure out. In the game, I'm talking, you know.
Yeah, so I think some of these would apply to Gambit as well, but I mean mostly for VP. I think what makes them such a difficult team is like, I mean, they play so slow and the map is so quiet. Like even just like watching demos, like I use Skybox, which has that sliding bar that shows you when every nade is thrown and every kill comes out and every smoke plumes and flashbang pops and everything. And there's always like a section, there's always like 1 to 2 big sections in these rounds where there's just like no activity whatsoever. So VP is just a team that plays very slow, very quiet. And normally you're listening to some kind of cue. Like, okay, they just threw the pin smoke. They're taking Xbox control right now. Okay, there's the flashbang. They just took control of Catwalk. So you can kind of like read where the team is going as they kind of work across the map. For example, VP, there's none of that. Like maybe there's like some initial smokes and some initial flashes, but it's just quiet. And they save a lot of utility. You'll notice a lot of times they don't often use like a full execute set piece the way the Europeans would do to attack somewhere. They're looking for a fight at all times. So they actually gain a lot of map control because they're willing to risk and take so many contact plays. And the reason they're willing to risk and actually take those contact plays is because at the moment, Yekindar is winning all of them.
Sure.
And then by the time and then eventually it gets down to, like 40 seconds left in the round, and you've probably used a decent amount of utility trying to keep them off of like different parts of the map. And then all of a sudden, because they've taken like three contact plays that haven't given you any indication of where the hit's going to come, all of a sudden they have this advanced map space that you haven't noticed because you've been looking elsewhere, and then all of a sudden all the smokes and the flashbangs pop up and they're into the bomb site. They get 2 kills. You're in a 3-on-4 retake, and they still have like 2 Molotovs and 4 flashbangs and a smoke left over from utility they didn't have to use earlier in the round. So it's kind of a weird feeling because one, you're trying to save utility because you know that they're going to have a lot of it for the eventual attack on the bomb site or the post plant, but by doing that you actually just strengthen the plays that Yekindar likes to make, which is like those highly aggressive, and if you're giving him space, he's going to find that space and he's going to test it, and obviously he's playing really well right now. So it's kind of like a catch-22. Not to mention, you don't always know where that attack is going to come from, right? You don't know if he's sliding up Catwalk or you don't know if he's actually sliding up a ramp. So he's at the moment just got a very good feel for the game and a feel for finding where the weak spot is in the defense and how much ground he can gain. So yeah, they're an odd team, and I mean even that has to do. You want to talk about Yekindar versus Jane being complete opposite styles. Imagine having to play against like the hyper aggressive Yekindar and realizing one of the best ways to stop those contact plays from being so aggressive is to get in his face and not give him that much space to work with. But then all of a sudden you're peeking into James, who's being a fucking asshole in the corner, not moving for the past 30 seconds. So I mean, there's frustrating factors to it. And at the moment, I think the biggest problem that teams and European teams at the moment are going to have reading it, and ourselves as well, is what are the cues of when Yekindar is making a play? What are the sound cues that we get from most teams? What is the information that we get from most teams that lets you know that they're making this kind of a play or that they're moving into this part of the map? And how can we actually use that? Can we find that to find a way to read them? So I've got some ideas on how I kind of want to try and play against them next time, and some ideas on how we're going to beat them. But it is just frustrating because they're actually sneakily, I think. For me, Gambit and VP and Spirit have been fun teams to practice against. They're super frustrating, and it's not always easy. But we've been kind of respecting them more and more for practice games and for what they've been doing. I think obviously Katowice opens a lot of eyes to it. But they're just they actually have, the more we looked into VP, the more we saw a team that was pretty damn good organized. Their utility usage was really good. They had some unique nades and flashbang combos. Because they like aggression, they're not afraid to like do like 2-person probing attacks on both bomb sites at the same exact time. So you're kind of shifting resources differently than you would be against other teams. And then you can add in the strategies that they have, the pace changes, the pops onto bomb sites, the quick pops out halls that you don't really expect. After you spend 5 rounds that are slow going to 30 seconds with no noise, the next round is a minute and 15 seconds. They're popping out halls, and all of a sudden you have to deal with that. So they call very good games, and they're all playing very well right now, which means their entire playbook is dangerous. So they're just a tough team at the moment to play against.
I have to say, like, I'm obviously never been a coach, but I feel like watching people just slow peak corners that James just holding with an off must be the most frustrating feeling in the entire game. Like, isn't this what we talked about in the demo review? Like, I told you he'd be in these, like, dude, it's like a worse version of what teams must feel like when they tell everyone, right, Device is going to be in these positions, he's going to rotate over here, and then you just still get caught, like, your first 2 players. It's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, well, it's not also about like knowing which angle James is going to hold. Like, there's no way. Like, even if I said, the best you could do is say like, okay, 50% of the time James is going to be holding this angle, and that's just a number for an example. But like, yeah, like you take that 50% chance, and like half the time he's there and you just die. So is that really a risk that you want to take? But also, it's because the part of the tough thing about it is, you have different protocols. So if you lose control of a certain part of the map, you need to gain control of a different part of the map on the other side, or you need to shift into a new position because that makes you vulnerable to this strategy that they can run, or this play that they like to make. And then all of a sudden you're shifting into those spots, but it's only one person. It's just fucking Yekindar who managed to get that map control on his own with 1 flashbang because he's psychotic, and he's also got a kill. So then you do your normal protocol, which would work against most of the teams you play against, and all of a sudden you've got 3 players from VP just sitting there waiting, including Jame with his op in a corner. So even sometimes just that the amount of pressure that Yekindar puts on has been tough to deal with, and I think we did a bad job against them of making him of putting a stop to that. I think they got a lot of easy ground against us for free, but it's not out of fear. It's just because of it's a lack of comfort, from playing against the team that you're going up against, and I think there's a lot of that going around. I think Device's post-game interview after Astralis lost to VP was pretty telling as well. He touched on a couple things also of, it's weird playing against teams and players that are so willing to be reckless and as aggressive as they are, teams that are willing to put that much aggression and take that much of a risk in their play. Like, let's not lie, turning like the long A corner on Dust 2 with no nades and flashbangs and just kind of checking it dry with an AK-47 is a huge risk. Like, you can just get your head blown off and all of a sudden the strat's gone. But if you take that risk and it's clear, or you win the fight, or you force him back, like, then you have a lot of map control. And I think most people have been trained to not take those kinds of risks because it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it once you get to like big tournaments and lands, and the amount of times we've gone through it, the amount of times we've done that and peeked into Device or Simple or Guardian or Kenny S over the years, and you're just trained to believe that it's not worth it. So, that's a lesson that, maybe they learn. Maybe it gets down to this. Maybe we get back to lands. Maybe we get back to, maybe teams just start playing better against them and taking those angles better and start killing them. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, where's your god now? If Yekindar is going to die every time he turns a corner, is your shit actually going to work or not? That's the big question now that VP is going to have to answer.
That's the thing, right? The longevity of this roster and the longevity of the way they were playing. I think we even saw a great example of that in the final against Gambit, right? Yekindar didn't have a great game. Yekindar didn't work out with his peaks, right? He was basically being shut down by Gambit, and they had his number. And you saw, where's it going to come from then? James is not going to be the proactive AWP player who's opening up the round or gaining ground or helping his teammates to perform better. You saw Buster. He came into the final, I believe it was with 12 maps in a row with a plus KD.
Yes.
I believe in all 4 maps in the final, he went negative, As long as Yekindar didn't open up the map for Buster, and as long as Yekindar didn't open up the map for Jane, they were both, I wouldn't say useless, but they were not as effective as they should have been, right? So right now you ride it out with Yekindar, who is a fantastic player. Let that be said. He did a fantastic tournament, but can we really expect Yekindar to play at that level with that much impact throughout every single tournament they play for the future? There's not a second layer. There's not a foundation that this is built up around. So I totally echo the sentiment of Jason here. It's going to be way tougher for VP for the future to replicate that kind of performance. Where I feel for Gambit, their whole play style, the way they attribute each other, the way the players complement each other is much more, dare say, fluid and fruitive for the future than for VP, right? They have the balance between Jame and Yekindar, and if one of those is not working, then the rest of the team will fall apart.
I mean, I think actually, I know Gambit, I agree. VP, I think, is going to have not an easy time, perhaps, but I think they're going to be able to adjust, because I actually really like, the more I looked into VP playing and the more the players looked into it, we kind of gained like a pretty big amount of respect for the gameplay and the style that VP brings out. I do think there's going to be a certain like readjustment period for someone like Yekindar and for that level of aggression, but I think they have a good game behind it as well, that hopefully they find a way to transition to dependence on that, and hopefully they can still stay impactful. But I don't know. I think on a different level, this is all just kind of a symptom of how much online Counter-Strike that we've been playing. And I don't mean that to say that these guys wouldn't be good on LAN or these guys wouldn't be able to replicate it on LAN. But online gameplay lends itself to more aggressive plays being successful, to the higher risk plays being more successful. It always has in 20 years of Counter-Strike. And what we've seen, like, who is the most exciting team that popped up during this online era of Counter-Strike in the past year and a half? It's undoubtedly Furia. Like, everyone has been obsessed with the style of play that they've been breaking out, the style of play that Art has been bringing in, the style of play that Henny has been bringing in while he also experienced a career-high individual peak. So at the moment, everyone's looking around at all these teams that are breaking out and finding new success, and it comes from these highly aggressive players. So you're going to see the younger teams say, oh, I'm going to start watching Art demos, and now we're going to have people start to watch Yekindar demos. And now there's just going to be more and more people and more teams testing out these very high aggressive, high risk play styles, and that's going to be something that's more effective during the online gameplay than it will be when we get back to LANs.
Speaking of that, by the way, I've got a few things. Obviously, you guys threw out so much. Like, on that last point there, watching the demos, that's one thing that I forget where I heard this. Maybe it was when Yekindar went on Maui Snake's like It's Server Time podcast or something. Or maybe Maui Snake himself told me. I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard that actually Yekindar is a player who himself is like studying the demos of the opponents and trying to find like his openings and where they're going to be and this stuff. Now, I've told people so many times on shows, but they always underestimate it. It is so rare that a star player does that he's in the it's one thing that, maybe they watch a demo with the coach if it's on LAN, or maybe the coach and the IGL watch a demo and then they tell like the Cliff's notes of like do this, do that, which by the way, half the time the player's probably forgetting the game anyway. Like, the idea a young star is doing that, that's one thing I'll give him immediately massive props for. Also, as Pimp is obviously a mad rising talent, really skilled player. I even think his story's pretty cool, just coming out of Latvia, a country nobody fucking knows for Counter-Strikes, or another kind of like putting the country on the map scenario. But I'll say this though, this is the one issue I have with Yekindar, which is, like, I get it, listen, do you, homie, feel comfortable in your own skin, believe in your own game, develop your own style, but understand, right, we didn't just sit around playing Counter-Strike for 20 years like a bunch of dom-doms who just don't understand how the game works. Like, you didn't crack nuclear fish, like cold fission, mate. Like, you haven't just invented a new style of Counter-Strike. What Moses was discussing earlier in Pimp, like, where you'll take a peak that normally, like, you use utility and you have another guy go with you. Like, when you do that on your own, what you're exploiting there is what other top teams are used to from other top teams. So what happens is, since the other top teams don't do that, you've got a little gap, but it's only for this moment. Eventually, teams will have a specific game plan for you when you do that peak. And you know what? When you do that peak instantly, you get insta-fragged, and now VP's got 4v5 at the beginning of a round. They've got no map. Like, that's going to be a real hard scenario to get out of. So I think he's a brilliant player right now. But the problem with that I have is this. Just as he got a lot of these edges, perhaps by studying the opponent, people are going to do that to them now. Like, they weren't on the radar in the same way. And then I want to throw this out there as well. I can kind of see where you're both coming from on the VP thing. I know why you think Gambit is like slightly better. I feel like the team, like, player for player looks like a better mix of players. I kind of agree with Jason though. The reason why, like, VP as a team did grow on me is because my logic goes like this. First of all, they're a team that look like you have to play them a whole bunch before you can ever get that style down. Meanwhile, and this is the more important thing, there's plenty of teams, Vega Squadron was a classic example, who had a very weird playing style, and if you didn't know how to play it, you were fucked. But it's more than that, because you could figure out Vega Squadron's style eventually and counter it. The reason it's really hard, I think, against VP is I'll give them massive credit. Like, they seem to know their own style super well. They seem to know exactly what they want to do, exactly how each player plays. Like, and in that sense, like, that that's what I think makes it so important. But I don't know, because I could kind of go both ways. Like, if I had to pick which one out of them and Gambit is like a top 10 team, like right now I feel like VP, but I sort of see where Pimp means. Like in a few months, maybe Gambit's like number 7 and they sort of keep developing. I could see both.
To me, it very much depends on how good Yekindar is going to be for the future. Because you're spot on, like he's a mad lad, like he's a mad talent, and the fact that you're describing him studying his opponents the way he is as an entry fragger, I think is even more important, right? It would be something else if you're just the second wave guy in where the setup is already out of place, right? If you're Yekindar, you're going in first, so you're going against the set setup sort of from your opponent. So the more you study that, the higher chances you'll have of being successful in your opening duels. Against Gambit on, I believe it was Vertigo, he won 12 out of 18 opening duels on Vertigo. That's
bonkers.
That was absolutely insane. He was involved in 18 opening duels, and he knew every single time where to look, every single time where to go. And that was the only reason VP even got a map in that series. Apart from that map, he didn't have any success in the opening duels. And Yekindar, he rides or dies with the success in the opening duels. Right?
Yes.
He rides or dies, and the same goes for Buster and the teammates around him. Jame and that whole balance we're describing right here between Jame and Yekindar, that doesn't work if Yekindar is not opening up and creating the space needed for Jame to thrive here. And I'm questioning.
Oh, and by the way, One thing I should also throw out there is, listen, my boy Yanko only just got back to events. He's trying to play things nice because everyone fucking hates him from FaZe Clan and MIBR. So you know what? He humoured you there, Yekindar, because you did nail him on that one round, right? And listen, like I say, if you think you've got the goods, just come with it. But all I'm saying is this, mate, run up on me on Twitter. Just try that scenario. We'll see. Because here's the thing, I'll become your number one fucking. I'll be the one who watches the Watchmen, motherfucker. That's all I need to say. So you know, just listen. Be careful with these analysts, mate, because eventually the fucking Dark Knight comes out. You know, when Gotham needs cleaning up, that's when I come to play, mate. That signal gets flashed in the sky, I'll be all over your bitch ass. Anyway, right, we'll move over now. We'll talk about another team. So we'll very briefly talk a bit about Spirit. We sort of did in discussing them, but I want to get actually Jason's thoughts, because this was a team where, I mean, they were another like revelation at the tournament, but this is also the one where they actually had been on top of the CIS region in the past. Like but they've done this weird thing where it's like they actually believe the Astralis fucking press releases. They're like, we've got like an 18-man roster. What the fuck are you doing? Like, and then the maddest one ever was, I used to personally actually think that fucking like the player they removed was their best player, and they just kicked him out of the team. So props to whoever is actually GMing that team, because it's working somehow. But I kind of agree with Pimp. Like, to me, that looked like, it reminded me of Vegas Squadron. It's like if everyone hits their peak and everyone just smashes you in the face with their headshot. Yeah, you're going to win some games, but like it's fucking hard to win a lot of games like that and over a long period of time. So where do you come down on this one, Moses? Did you watch them and you prep for them at all?
Spirit?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, and we scrimmed against them a bunch. That was
Are they the same in scrims?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they are. I mean, they're crazy. They're hard. Again, it's another one of those teams where it feels really uncomfortable playing against them because they are just super fucking aggressive. Dexter's great. I think of all the CIS teams that have kind of been a revelation at Katowice, Spirit's the one I think that is the furthest to go before they'll be able to kind of impress on long term. At the moment, I think it's just going to be kind of like an exciting style. Obviously, Dexter is going to be a name that we start keeping track of event to event and pretty much every single time to see where he's going. But they didn't feel like they had the same kind of like team cohesion that the VPs have and that Gambit has. So yeah, I don't know. They're good and they're frustrating to play against, and that's why I like scrimming against them, because it does like require a lot of like communication and focus. But they don't. You know, they don't have that same feel. I think they're going to struggle to find like a comfortable place moving forward in the top 10. I think they're going to struggle to find a way to be able to go deep into events time and time again after this. But no doubt they have some really, really talented, really skilled players. But I don't have any crazy insight on these guys. Also, by the way, you know, I would hate to blow my own horn, Moses, but let me just go ahead and do it for this segment. Here we go.
So
yeah.
What I would say is this. I'll actually just, this is how childish I am. I'm actually just going to repeat a Twitter burn I made, because during all that shit where everything was going off, and then obviously Na'Vi didn't go deep enough, Na'Vi's like social media manager, whoever the fuck this is, because obviously it's not really the teams and players who tweet. We all know that. Did a tweet, right, which was like some fucking like self-pitying tweet, like, and then they wonder how we can have any trouble playing with CIS teams in home tournaments. So I'll just read out what my reply was. I think I fucking banged this kid out. I just put, definitely couldn't be that part where Electronic is the last good player you signed, and that was over 3 years ago, allowing all the prime rising players to sign with you, to play in your CIS rivals and beat that ass, right? Like, mate, these are all the players you should have been recruiting, you fucking idiot. What are you talking about? That would be like if Barcelona or someone isn't the best anymore, and you're like, yeah, but you didn't sign any of the good players. Like, yeah, it's hard to win against them. It's like, what are you talking about? You have to retool.
That's a fair point. I will say with Spirit, I remember we scrimmed them on Dust 2, I think like 3 days before their series with Astralis or something like that. And we were like laughing like the day of the match and everything, and it was like, yeah, Astralis is just gonna bang that ass out. Like we were like, yeah, Spirit has no chance. And then we saw the veto, and the third map was Dust 2, and we were just like, all right, if it gets to Dust 2, Spirit wins. Like, Spirit might actually be one of the best teams in the world on Dust 2. They are so hard to play against on that map. So when we actually saw that veto, we saw it made it to a third map, it was, we were just all kind of laughing because it was like, yep, the Astralis is done. We didn't think it'd be like a 16-1 or whatever the fuck it ended up being, but like that Spirit, for what, like, they're just so good on Dust 2, which shouldn't be a surprise. All those teams, Gambit, VP, they're going to be good on Dust 2 because the aggressive and risk-taking style, I think, lends itself to a lot of success on Dust 2. You can do a lot of different things.
I think that was the point of it, though. That's the most impressive thing. They did it on the CT side, right? On Dust, a map where it's very tough to be aggressive to some degree, right? At some point, you'd expect, an AWP player just to hold a certain angle, and if you step one step too far, you'll be punished for it. But Spirit constantly found the gaps within Astralis. Coming to think of it, right, in history, Astralis have lost 16-1 twice, and it was against MSL with an AWP and Dust 2, and now against Team Spirit. So it makes sense that would be an out-of-the-ordinary game, right? Spirit are not going to be able to freaking replicate that, just as MSL weren't able to replicate him.
Dude,
like,
you know the sickest thing about that is, like, every time you say that, like, I feel like I almost want to throw up a little bit about my mouth. It's like, against MSL and getting 16-1 when he was up, and he was feels like... Not least because here's the part people don't know, because I see people sometimes be like, I know Pimp wants to come back to play, why doesn't he play with MSL? It's like, brother, you need a little history lesson. Let me take you to one side a second. MSL and Pimp aren't buds because MSL kicked Pimp out the team after, are you ready for the context of this? After Pimp swapped to be in the AWPer when they got rid of the Nico with a C, and obviously, like, here's the thing, Pimp was all right. He was just like up and down like a lot of players who were riflers who try being an AWPer, and obviously he hadn't done it for long enough, right? So the idea MSL himself later was like, you know what? If none of you can fucking do it right, give it here. And then he just thinks he's the AWPer now. Like, that whole thing, the entire thing makes me sick, Pimp. It makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, well, you and me both.
Way to bring up all the bad vibes.
And also, I just want to say, because we're going to talk about Astralis next, as if we needed a more perfect segue for the fact that, listen, I know it sounds mad because it was only 3 months ago they were the best team in the world. But like, dude, I can't lie. I know obviously people expect me to say this, but I think Astralis is in trouble, mate. And the reason why that map is a perfect example is because you remember when everyone was like, yay, we didn't get 16-0'd. Dude, go back in time. You remember in I think it was the end of 2018 when Astralis was unbeatable and they had that game against Nip on Mirage and they 15-0'd them, then Forest won the pistol or whatever, and everyone was like, haha, we didn't get 16-0'd. And I was like, brother, if bragging about not losing 16-0 and just losing 16-1 or 16-2's the score, we got bigger problems. I feel like, having trouble at home. Dude, I know it sounds like haterism because the problem is as well, this is bizarre, I actually still think Device is straight fire. I think some elements of the team are still good, but I also do feel bearing in mind, nobody keeps the roster together as long as they do. Nobody comes back 2-3 times to the top. Where are you seeing weaknesses, Moses, or where are the issues here?
I think individually they're all still really, really good and really great. I think if anything at the time, it feels like they're having a little bit of a crisis of confidence and trust within the team as a whole. I still watch all of them play really good Counter-Strike. I still watch all of them do good stuff. And then I think the most uncharacteristic thing that I saw this event was watching the Spirit versus Astralis demos. And if you go back and watch the Inferno match, there's a stretch of 4 or 5 rounds where Device just misses the easiest shots that you see him hit 10 out of 10 times. And I think you see, and I when you have a player like that missing kind of those sorts of sitters over and over again in a match, for me, my brain always goes to, I don't think it's an individual problem. I think there's some level of miscomfort within the team that they don't have full confidence in what their teammates are going to be doing. They don't have full trust that their teammates are going to have their back, that there's something going on within the unit that makes them individually get thrown a little bit off their game. And that's what I think Astralis is struggling through. And I honestly, I don't even know if I consider it to be that big of a deal. I think more than anything at the moment, I feel like this is just a natural ebb and flow of being a professional roster. And it's hard once you hit that down point within a team to get to go back up to like the good times, because it's just hard. It's usually a mental game, so it's hard to get everyone back on the same page. And Astralis has already done it a few times. Like, the reasons we don't see teams last and lineups last as long as Astralis is because normally at this point they've hit a downturn that they couldn't get out of, and that's where the roster change comes in.
Yes, of course.
They haven't had to fucking do that yet, and I don't know if they're going to. I think they're going to still try and get this one out with the roster, but I think at the moment it's just kind of like an internal crisis of the team. But I don't know. More than anything, honest to God, I didn't have any doubt that they would be able to find a better form of Astralis going into the playoffs at Katowice. They still got that ass beat by VP, same as us. And I haven't lost any confidence that coming into the next event that they're not going to be one of the contenders to win it. So I mean, I don't know if I really think they're in crisis mode just yet. But it seems to me to be a team issue more than any kind of individual issue.
I think it's all external stuff going on right now. And I know you're going to love this, Duncan, right? But the whole Bobski thing is just outrageous, right? You look at it, and from a player point of view, I can only imagine, because they don't really tell us. And that's the cool thing about Astralis, right? They're so happy to make press releases when they integrate a new player, or when they sign up a 7th player from the youngster team to make all the PR go towards that. But they don't really tell us how they're trying to integrate Bobski. Are they pregging with him? Are they, maybe Jason can even chime in. I don't know if you've been pregging against Astralis with Bobski on the lineup outside of Nuke, right? But this whole thing of trying to maintain a happy family picture outside to the outside world, when you know that internally things are not going the way you want to, is making me throw up, right? That's the one thing I dislike about Astralis. There's a lot of good stuff going in there, and I think, Duncan, sometimes you may be a little bit too rough on them, right, in the edges. But I agree with this one. Like, it's so goddamn annoying that you constantly have to portray your family as one big happy family, when you know that, like all other families, shit is going on within the family, right? That's just how it goes. Integrating Bobski, leaving or getting Sipnix out of the roster, especially in the beginning when Sipnix was not performing well, because he just came off a break of 6 months. Of course, he was not up to date with the game, and all of a sudden you now don't want him to play Nuke anymore. You can imagine what kind of trust issues that would give Sipnix for the future being. Then you integrate Sipnix back into Nuke because you realize that Bobski's not working on Nuke, and all of a sudden you have a team where I think Astralis, for such a long period, they thrived so well, knowing that there were those 5 guys. And even if Astralis, sometimes as an organization would push them in a certain direction, they would still be together as this 5 unit. They knew that they were stronger than basically everything else around them. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that whole, unit within Astralis right now have been poked a little bit too much too, trying to integrate Bobski. S-Attack coming in, doing well. Was that a mistake letting him go? Should they have sold him to Cloud9? Should they have kept him? Yada, yada, yada. There's just so much stuff going on an organizational point of view that I think that interferes with the players. So when Jason is saying he is with Device is not a bad player. He's not missing 5 shots in a row that he's supposed to hit unless something is going on. I don't know, but that's just my assumption right here, that right now the core ingredients of what made Astralis so good in terms of individual brilliance, in terms of them being so gelled well together, it's just slowly but surely falling apart for my liking. So I think they're entering a crisis. I don't think we've seen the worst from Astralis just yet. I think it's going to get worse.
I even said this on By the Numbers, but I actually give them mad props that they were able to still win all those tournaments while fucking around with the whole Bobski swapping in and then coming and even they used to win Nuke half the time. To actually do that, listen, I think it's ridiculous you do it, because either you believe in him and it's a real player, or you're just doing it look, we do play him, but sort of only a bit. The reason why I find that whack though is, listen, it's sick that you made it work, but I do like the way as soon as they lost that fucking global finals and then got banged out of Blast, they were even before that, just after they lost the global finals, they were look, Bobs, get the fuck out. We're trying to play seriously now, mate. Look, we can't be fucking around with you every other week, mate. You just get on the bench. It's guys, can I play? Because I have to say, Moses, I do think there's a player in this team who is massively underperforming, and it's my boy Magisk. And the reason why that alarms me is purely as a historian, and this is why. Because Magisk has been in 2 different teams where he was straight fire and then he falls off and he never recovered. He was in North. Everyone goes, no, that's wrong. He was amazing in North, and then MSL kicked him. MSL kicked him about fucking 5 months after he was amazing. He'd fallen off the map. Now, you can claim he swapped his spots or whatever. Listen, you don't swap the spots of the best player in your fucking team if there's not an issue. Then he went to that Optic team. Oh, you like to all pretend that didn't happen, don't you? You like to all pretend he came straight from fucking dropping 37 on VP. The next day he joined Astralis. There's a reason he wasn't the number 1 option. He was a mad gamble when he was in Optic. In that Optic team, that was a complete joke team, but they were all decent players, and he just looked good. That was it. So I have to say, when you consider he played very, very good for many years in Astralis, and then this is what kills me, is the other trend that I've noticed that he plays into is the star player who becomes the IGL. Tell you what, if he really was IGLing, then winning the EPL, and then winning those amazing job, I could never even have guessed sometimes it wasn't Glaive. The problem with that is, though, it has to change your game, and there's very few players came back because the way your brain now thinks of a game and what you're doing and how... It just affects you. That's the reason why the players who do that almost never become like the best again individually. It's just very, very rare. So I'm not saying they have to kick him. That's probably going too far. Like, I'd still stick it out. And, like, especially if you think lands are coming, I'd obviously wait until there's lands. But I'm alarmed by it for sure, because that guy used to just, like, be the sleeper carrier of that team half the time. Like, every time they didn't have a great game for someone else, he just fucking banged them out. So I don't think you can miss what he had.
Yeah, that's fair, and I know he had a rough Katowice. He's actually had a pretty rough start to all of 2021, which caught me off guard a little bit. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think you can touch him just yet. I think you obviously give him some time to get back into it, but you certainly keep an eye on the situation. I don't know. It's a weird scenario with Bubsky as well. Didn't they just announce? Wasn't there like a new that they were going to try the 6-man roster a different way? Didn't he give some interview on HLTV where he was?
Bubsky wasn't it? Bubsky said it, but even then he didn't like give the exact way. So it's like, come on. Like,
yeah, he said it's going to start from. I just opened it here. We had to rethink the whole idea of a 6-man roster, and we tried to come up with something different. But I won't really just play one map. I can now play multiple maps. And from Pro League on, we're going to see me coming in to do some work.
Okay.
So starting in Pro League, and I think this says it was more because of the Valve ruling that they wouldn't allow subs mid series.
I do know that Bobsky has been played by Astralis a lot on the map DE Sieved. DE Sieved, you know that?
That was good. You did. What was the other one you did? DE motivated. That one.
Yeah, there you go.
That
wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. Whatever. Listen, the old jokes work the best. They don't have to be good.
It's weird, and actually, I mean, I've even just entertained the thoughts of a 6-man roster as a coach in my own head at different times, just to try and think of how it could possibly work. And I can't think of a good way to do it. I honestly can't think of a good way at the moment to make a 6-man rotation work. I don't even know. The closest team we've seen come to making it work is the Vitality roster. Yes. And that's obviously kind of, driven off a cliff of its own as well at the moment going into Katowice. Sure. They had a really poor event. So, compared to their standards. So, the 6-man, this idea of having 6 men that you can rotate in, is tough. And it's, I don't know if there's a good way. I think even Navi kind of struggles with it in some ways, bringing Bit in for Flame Me on certain maps. So, I don't know. I don't think any team has figured it out just yet.
Do they not have that saying? Like, obviously we have idioms in English. I don't know if they're all like, the languages or whatever, like, I mean, I've looked up like some fucking proverbs, like Polish or whatever. Some of those are fucking mental, mate. Like, you wouldn't even know what they meant. But what about, like, do you have in Danish something equivalent, Pimp, to the quote where it's like, the concept is called the exception that proves the rule. It's the idea that if something generally doesn't happen and then one thing it happens, if anything, that shows that it doesn't happen the rest of the time because it's so bizarre. Because to me, Vitality actually shows that a 6-man roster doesn't work because they're the only one that can make it work, and in a very, very weird way under the most like bizarre circumstances ever. Like, I agree. I think Na'Vi just does it because they know that their lineup isn't good enough. Give Flamey a game off. I don't think Bit's that good, mate. I don't blame him. I mean, I think he's underqualified to be on this team. So what do you think, Pimp? Is it actually, do you believe in the concept of the 6-man roster? Are you warming up to it?
No, not at all. I had the discussion with Matthew as well on Blast, and he thinks it's the way to go, right? And I think he's deceived by Vitality's success as well. I tend to do agree with you though on this. There's that, like, it's a one team, like it's one team making it work, and I don't really buy the argument that it's the rule that whatever you call it.
The exception that proves the rule.
Prove the exception. Yeah, I don't really buy into that because I haven't seen any team done it. I haven't seen Astralis. They talked about doing it for so long, but they never did it fully, right? Vitality is the only team who's ever tested the concept. They're the only team who's ever done it fully. So you can argue that there's 100% success rate of teams doing it full time, or 100% success rate of teams actually pulling it off. So I can definitely buy into why Matthew and why James, for that matter as well, we had the discussion at Blast, believes that's to be the case. But I don't think, as a player, from a player perspective, as Jason said, if you're a coach thinking about it, the amount of obstacles you will face trying to implement a 6-man roster not even taking into account that Valve hate the idea, that they want to do everything they can.
Yeah, that's the big one too. They can just end the entire dream, even if you find a way to make it work. They can be like,
your job is jeopardy, right? As a coach, you got to feel that a couple of weeks ago, and even excluding that, I'm having a hard time seeing how it on a consistent basis should work out for the future.
By the way, keep going.
Yeah, no, just as a player, the best example I can give, and my argument is that if you're Shocks, for example, in Vitality, and one thing is doing it online where the tournaments just have less of a pedigree, you don't really care that much, But if you're Shocks and you're traveling to Beijing to play the major in Beijing, and you are all of a sudden getting told in the best of 3 final that you're not playing map 2 and map 3, how do you take that if you're Shocks? Your ego, is that going to stand it? If you're Shocks, you want to be involved in the game, but no longer are you going to be so. If you're Misuda, you're going to travel with Vitality to Beijing, the major. Thought example right here, and you're getting told that you'll play on this map, and turns out that you're vetoing that map like Astralis did for you, for example.
Dude, that's brutal. Imagine that. Imagine being stood behind the PCs. Oh, fucking hell, I'm in my first major final. This is sick. Like,
exactly.
But and the vetoes come up, just 2.
But you saw that with Buffy, right?
Yeah, true.
Period. They vetoed Nuke, every time they had the chance to pick Nuke as a third map, they're just like, nah, fuck it, we're not going to play it. So at a LAN event, that's not going to be sustainable. I don't see a way that's going to work. So I'm not buying into the project just yet at all.
By the way, that's why I did that Twitter thread about Bobski. So I looked it up. I thought, okay, let's look into it. Let's treat it as if it's a real thing. I looked how many maps he played. And then, dude, all that needed to be said was that if the other team didn't pick Nuke, because by the way, everyone thinks what Astralis do. Astralis weren't picking it. If the other team didn't pick Nuke, Astralis sometimes second round vetoed it. Now, if you have a 6-man lineup and he's a good player, you want him to play Counter-Strike. You don't want him to, listen, mate, we can't afford you coming in, so we're just going to veto that map. Like, what is he practicing then? And then I've got to say the other thing as well is, where was I going with this? There was one last angle I had on this one. Oh, that's it. Of course it would be fucking Maniac, who is Mathieu that he's referring to here. Of course Maniac would be the one who would still believe in it. Listen, if I ever get some really horrible terminal illness or something, the doctors tell me, look, there's not even a cure, mate. Like, you're just going to lie here on a bed. It's going to go bad. Like, don't even give any hope. In fact, what's the classic thing they say? Like, make your peace with everyone. Like, call in your the person I want you to call is not my family. Call in fucking Maniac. Get him in the room. He'll be sitting there going, I think you can still make it, Thorin. Like, I still see a future in this. Like, it never can be as bad as it seems. Like, this motherfucker is like the most optimistic guy I've ever met in my entire life. He's unbelievable. I actually think, though, as long as you balance it on the desk, it works. Like, that's why it works. But fucking hell, mate. Like, he is just the most rose-tinted glasses motherfucker I've ever met.
I have my phone, and as I said, I buy the argument that we've only seen one team, do it. We've only seen Vitality 100% invest into it. So if that's your main takeaway point, I can buy into it. I just, from a player perspective, don't see a world where that's going to work. Like Jason, you implement, you implement a new player to a lineup, and you're telling Elise you're no longer playing Nuke, right? And Elise is not playing the third.
Well, I mean, let's everybody calm down, because if we institute a 6-man roster, it's not Elise coming out of the fucking lineup.
Then again, what message?
Simple's not coming out of Navi. Dice isn't coming out of Astralis. Fucking Zyru isn't coming out of Vitality.
You're gonna hurt some players' egos along the way, whether that be Nafla, Fallen, or whoever that may be. It's gonna create a bad environment, and that bad environment is not gonna be worth the gamble.
I mean, that's just one of the obstacles that you'd have to overcome, right? Like someone might have a bruised ego if they're the one being taken out. Someone might not want to be taken out on certain maps or certain situations. I mean, even if you look at it and you say, even if I said I don't want to actually have a 6-man rotation where the player is going to play only on Overpass or only on this one map, even if I just said, I just want to have a 6-man who I can bring to an event once in a while to give someone a break or give someone some time off, or maybe give someone a week off away from practice and to do their own thing, whatever it might be. Even that, I don't think fully works, because if you ever want to go to an event, it's like, why are we going to an event with this 6-man instead of our starting roster? Like, you can't actually even appropriately give time off in any meaningful way either. And then that doesn't even get you started on, I mean, it's just there's so many areas, so many different obstacles that I don't think you could overcome. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think the 6-man. Well, I mean, as we're all kind of circling back, the 6-man thing doesn't make sense to me quite yet. I want it to. Trust me. Even before I was a coach, I was a proponent of the 6-man roster for these exact reasons. And then when I became a coach and thought about having to practically put them into use, I don't see how it would work. I don't see how it works quite yet. And I want to find a way, because I do think there's some benefits that I can provide. I just don't think so at the moment.
Also, how dare you, Pimp, suggest the idea that Fallen wouldn't play some of the maps? What are you talking about? The Stewie 2K IGL era?
Yeah, man.
You know,
That's a
just
good
leave that
era.
one out there. Just leave that one out there. Just leave that one out there. Just leave that one out there on the table. Just let that one marinate. It's a bit of steam coming off it, you know. It's a bit hot. Don't touch that one just yet, Moses. Whatever. Let's talk a bit about Team Liquid then. Now, obviously, Moses has to be
Let's
careful
do it.
here.
Let's do it, yeah.
But listen, if people are going to call you a ball fraud and they're going to say that all Yanko did was just, you know, make stories as to why Nico wasn't fucking up and, you know, you're just now going to, well, then at least do your fucking job, make up the excuses. Like, because the weird thing about this one, Moses, is people saw my tweet. Y'all fucking got me. I don't know how. Because listen, I promised myself after that end of 2019, I'm never fucking betting on these motherfuckers again. You're never going to catch me again. It ain't going to happen. There's too many times. Because you have to understand, I really thought, like, oh, fuck the major, they're going to win all the tournaments afterwards. It's like, I'd lose every single time to Astralis. Like, right, oh, great, that's good. So, I can't lie. It's not that I totally believed in Team Liquid, although certainly the Na'Vi game looked great. It's that I also did just think, I just don't believe in the CIS teams as much. That was the angle I was sort of taking, but classic Team Liquid let down. 2-0, of course, quite convincingly as well. Like, wasn't even that good a game, I know.
I was this close to making a tweet right before those games. I was going to tweet that a CIS team will not be lifting the trophy.
Oh, Jesus. No.
And I was like, shouldn't do that.
Dude, that would have haunted you. That tweet would have been like, you know, images that precede unfortunate event. That would have haunted you for so long. Yeah, I know.
So, yeah, I avoided that catastrophe at least.
What do you think yeah, come on, give us some thoughts on the team. Where they are. There's an upward trend, clearly, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly this Katowice was good for us in a way, and also, I mean, obviously really disappointed in how it ended against VP, because you're right, that wasn't a good game out of us, and it wasn't a good game to watch. But the nice thing was, since everyone was focused on how good Yekindar is, no one was really trashing on Liquid too much. They were just talking about how good VP was. So that was nice. Yeah, there we go.
Exactly.
But you know, we're in an okay place. I think there's still a lot of, as you can see, a little bit of like inconsistency, like in how we can look against a Na'Vi team, and then how we can look against Virtus.pro, you know, a week later, and still trying to iron out that inconsistency. There's still a lot of moving parts. Obviously, just switching over to Fallen as the in-game leader. So, I mean, it's a huge amount of getting Fallen up to speed, not only on the tactics that we're running, but also kind of, you know, the different philosophy on the map. So I think John and Jake have done a great job working with Fallen, like catching them up to speed on certain things and how they like to play the maps and how they kind of look at the maps and, you know, how they look at, you know, the openings, the end games, the mid rounds, like what are the important factors of when they're calling on the map that we, you know, what are the set goals that we have to accomplish to get to certain situations. And then also, you know, bringing Fallen up to speed too on kind of a, you know, individual game on where the Opper can rotate, what the options are for the Opper, you know, where does he go for an opening pick and where can he go after that. So we've been getting him up to speed on that and kind of help him improve there and trying some new things out with that. So, I mean, the team's working together really, really well at the moment. It's just a matter of, still, you know, the nice thing was when we started Katowice, we won these play-ons. When we beat FaZe, it was a good surge of confidence, which I think led us into beating Vitality, which gave a good surge of confidence, which leads into beating Na'Vi later on. We beat OG in there somewhere as well. So I think, you know, a lot of the confidence kind of got lifted up, which kept allowing us to have better and better games. And then the inconsistency came in, which was a bit rough, but. You know, we're in a good place. It's just a matter of making sure that we can deliver the same performance game in, game out, and at the moment we're not quite there yet.
Moses, I've got one quick question for you, mate. And this is entirely up to your discretion to answer or not. When VP beat Astralis, did the players get really happy in Team Liquid?
No.
That's good then, okay. Because that would have been also an ultimate like cursed thing, like, yay, we don't have to play Astralis, yeah, like, and then VP just bangs their hats.
Yeah, I think there were. I mean, I think on some level, it would have. We knew VP was going to be a really tough game. Kind of our conversation leading into that match was, you know, if you just look at the names, this would obviously be the matchup you want. Like if someone told us before the event, like, listen, you're going to make it to the semifinals, and to get to the grand finals, you won't have to play Device, you won't have to play Simple, you won't have to play Astralis or Na'Vi. Like that'll be your path to the finals. I think any team in the world would have taken that hands down without any complaints. But we also know, you know, from practicing pressing against these teams, these CIS teams like Gambit and Spirit and Virtus.pro, we knew stylistically, in some ways, it was going to be a lot more difficult because they are a bit more of the unknown. They are like a way more unique play style that we're not as familiar with. So in some cases there was good, but in some cases there was some obviously some tough things that we'd have to overcome. But nobody was happy. Nobody was like, oh, good, we've got an easy semifinal. So yeah, we had at that point we'd had a healthy respect for VP, and I think the more we prepped into them, we just had more and more respect for how they were kind of doing things and how they were playing. So we didn't underestimate them in any way. Just a really poorly played game on our part, to be quite frank. And that was the conversation afterwards. We still have this tendency in the team, and it's a tendency that Team Liquid's had since their inception, where there are just games, and Pimp, you can obviously relate to this too, having spent some time within the roster. There are games where you feel like you're playing the opponent and you're playing yourselves. At the same exact time, and we still struggle to get over that. And that VP semifinal was a game that we played VP and we played against ourselves. The Navi game was a game where we played against Navi, and that was it. And we were able to overcome that. And unfortunately, as it's been an issue for a number of years, we weren't able to beat ourselves well enough to be able to actually fight VP on a level playing ground, and we got embarrassed. So. Yeah, that's kind of the problems that we need to work on going forward in our next boot camp is eliminate the fact that we have to play two teams in some of these matches.
What do you think then, Pimp?
I think that given the certain changes, Fallen taking over the in-game leading role, I was wrongfully assuming that was part of the plan all the time, right?
Yes,
that
same.
That was going to be a transition period. First and foremost, good call. You should have done that from the beginning.
Well, yeah. Well, I can speak to that too, because I know there's been a lot of comments about that. I know when we brought Fallen into the team, we wanted to keep Stewie as the in-game leader. One, to kind of make it so we didn't want Fallen to have to lead in the brand new team while learning the tactics and the strategies and while going over everything. More than anything, I think Jake reads the game incredibly well. Like, Jake is one of those players, I think, that when if you could have a glimpse into what he's calling and how he's reading as he's in-game leading, it's astounding how accurate he is of where the team is going to be positioned and how they're rotating and how they're moving. And I really liked that kind of asset of his in-game leading. There were other parts of his in-game leadership that I wanted to improve upon, and there's other factors to being an in-game leader that he needs to get better on. And the idea was to have Fallen come in and be a safety net and be a little bit of support to help kind of teach him and navigate some of the tougher parts of IGLing. But it was also one of the things that made Fallen such an intriguing pickup to us, was that if we did encounter something, if we did get into a situation that we didn't like and we wanted to bail out, he provides like a really easy plan B to just let him be the in-game leader. So he allowed us a lot of flexibility in that sense. So yeah, obviously when you get banged out by FaZe and the player that you just cut twice in one weekend, it kind of is a come to Jesus moment. You kind of look at things a little bit closer. So yeah, we decided to make the switch, but it was always the plan to keep Jake in that role, and then have the ability to go away from it if we needed to. And we just deemed we needed to at that point.
I'm just glad it's part of the pickup reason, right? Because I look isolated on Fallen, if it wasn't planned to integrate him somehow into the in-game looting roles, or at least, using that experience he had in that role, then it wouldn't make sense for my money, at least to pick him up in the first place. So that makes sense the way you're describing it now. Of course, he offers a lot outside of that. Now, when I look at Liquid play right now, completely objectively, I think you're trajecting upwards, of course. It's looking better. But also come to think that when Fallen is the in-game leader, right, what made him so good in MIBR, what made MIBR so good back in the days, 3, 4, 5 years ago, was the mid-round calling, was the understanding the players in between that Fallen could lead the charge, right? It was the cold zeros, in a 3 versus 3. When you're playing against MIBR, you just knew that you're going to lose the round because Fallen was alive, Cold Zero was alive, and the way they played off each other and the way that Cold Zero and Fallen could lead those guys in threes was so unique and so well played. That's something that takes, I would say, weeks and months of practice, and synergy to be built up. So I don't think Fallen as an in-game leader right now, outside of course, the aspect that he's very experienced, and Jason can again attach to this if I'm missing some nuances here, but Fallen is a great in-game leader, right? But where Fallen comes into to play the best is when he can mid-round call deep into the rounds, when he has synergy between all the players, where all players know how it is to play with each other and play their opponents sort of. So I don't see Liquid peaking right now. I don't see them peaking next month. I see them peaking if they keep this lineup, if they keep the upward trajectory, and if Fallen can get into place again, being the player that he were maybe not as good, but just somewhat decent. You can get Jake back to being I was even looking over statistics, right? In 2017, 2018, he was at a 1.15 rating for the year, and the last couple of years it's been below 1. There's a big drop off right there in individual skill. If you can just get those two players back to a somewhat normal level of individual impact, dare I say it, on the server, I think Liquid have a lot of potential with Fallen on their lineup, but I'm not seeing it happening within the next week or the next couple of months. It takes time to build up that synergy where you get the best out of Fallen.
Also, let's be real. They did beat fucking Vitality and Na'Vi in best of 3. Like, that would win you a tournament normally. Like, that's no joke, So I think, there was the whole thing at Blast, but that Blast thing was like some fucking movie where Twists just was like, I must get revenge. I didn't even know what the fuck that tournament was. I'd put that one out of my mind. That one doesn't even count. That wasn't even a real team, was it? It didn't have Carrigan in the lineup yet. So I don't take that too seriously. I think generally TL's on the up and up, mate.
Also, this isn't to knock on FaZe at all, but even the performance out of Olaf in those first 2 games, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why is he just come out of the grave just to bang us out?
Just to blue balls everyone right at the end of his career. Yeah, I know. Ridiculous, isn't it? I know. That was just some Twilight Zone shit, that match, mate. I wouldn't even consider those real games. Fuck that. Forget that shit. Forget it. Move on. Right, what about this then? I find it really hard to know which way to go on the Vitality story. Because, again, this isn't something I've done yet because I haven't done the piece of content. But I know, I personally had the feeling, I thought they were kind of the best team last year. I know maybe if you count, Raw Championships, Astralis had more, and then, Na'Vi had, a very good record on top 4s. You can obviously go different ways depending on what you're counting. But if I had to pick the team that, game in and game out, I thought played, the best Counter-Strike, I would have picked Vitality last year. I thought they did a great job. Then they came and they did the fucking 6-man roster and made that work. I thought everything they did was genius almost. They were just doing really, really good shit aside from those weird finals they lost. So I know now, because they had this bizarre thing where even though I just had Apex on my fucking show where we were talking about the lineup and the 6-man roster, immediately afterwards he gets benched in a really weird way. And this is how you know it's weird. Because if it wasn't weird, right, you just bench him and go, look, he was benched for some reasons, there's no problem. But then it's almost like they were losing, so they were like, fuck, get him back in the lineup. That's how you know something's going on. Something about that didn't make sense. He didn't need just 1 week off, did he? That doesn't make fucking sense. So to me, that does hint that there's something going on there, because I would have picked that team as the obvious team to stay at the top. The others had different reasons. Maybe Na'Vi's players don't play as well. Okay, maybe Astralis has had too long. I don't know what's going on with Vitality. Pimp, start us off here. What do you think the issue with Vitality is?
It's a good question. I think obviously there's some internal stuff going on right now. You can't neglect that. Look away from that. With Apex going on and off the team, the way it was happening as well, to me sounded very weird. I remember we did Blast and we got to know it 2 hours before the game, right? So it was a decision that was made on the day. It was not something they planned for at all. I believe they played 1 game one day and then the next day he was benched, right? So it was something happening very, very spontaneoemously, which is never a good thing when it comes to a Counter-Strike team and planning. Second of all, I actually expected Vitality to drop off. What people seem to forget here is that the reason the 6-man roster was working so well was the fact that Nevera was a god. We knew the core lineup of Vitality was doing a good job. They could be up there, maybe one of the best teams, if not then the second or the third best. When you then add the spice of Nevera coming in on Dust 2 and Inferno, later stages of Nuke, he was playing out of his mind. He came from nowhere. I was watching him in Heretics or whatever they're called, or the team he was playing in before, right? And he wasn't that good. He was a decent player, of course, some potential, but he wasn't at that level. He was not supposed to be a carry player of a team of the Vitality's caliber. So he came in with a lot of motivation. He did one hell of a job, but at some point we're going to see that drop off, and we're seeing that right now. Nevera is nowhere near that level anymore. And then you again start to look at your Vitality. Whereas Zyvu is not playing up to his best. The second strings of that lineup, are they really strong enough? With Nevera not playing that well, Shocks, a bit too much up and down for my taste. RPK, of course, a stable player. Misuta, he adds a lot of stability, I guess, to the lineup. But again, when you look at the raw firepower of a team Vitality, they don't really have a lot to match, when you look at the Astralis or even when you look at Liquid. I feel Liquid is a team that has the same amount of firepower as Vitality, being nowhere near the same ranking, right? So for me, it was an expected drop-off in the sense that Nevera was never going to continue at that level of play. I don't know why people were all of a sudden saying that he's going to be a top 20 player the next year. He played 12 or 14 maps, being highly motivated in a once-of-a-lifetime opportunity within Vitality in that environment. Of course he's going to perform well because the dude is good, but he's not going to be the new Zyvu. He's not going to be the new Shocks, or the Shocks of 2015 being the carry of that lineup. He's going to be a good player. He's going to be a versatile player. And he's going to be a useful player, but it still has to come from Zyvu. It still has to come from Shocks. And right now it's not. And that's why Vitality is struggling big time.
What do you think of Vitality, Moses?
I would like them to continue to struggle just the way they're struggling at the moment. I would fucking love that. I don't know what to think. I think the point about Apex and that back and forth is a fair one to bring up and say there's got to be something deeper going on. I don't know what it would be. I think when we played against them, especially on Mirage, and especially, I mean, just looking into them as well from how they've played in the past, I think they're in like a weird. I think tactically they're at like a fork in the road of what kind of identity they want to have. I think, if you go back and watch that VOD or the demo of when they played us on Mirage, the strategies and the tactics that they were running and calling seemed very disjointed, and they seemed like desperate. Like, how when a team can play like a standard game of Counter-Strike for like 4 rounds, and they'll change the pace, and they'll pop out like halls, they'll pop out Palace, they'll pop out B, they'll pop out a ramp, and that change of pace is like catches you really, really off guard. It felt like Vitality was calling those tactics as the standard. They were calling like the change of pace tactics just round after round. Like, we're going to send one guy mid and 4 guys are going to bust up a ramp, or we're going to send one guy mid and 4 guys are going to bust out Palace. But they did it like 5 rounds in a row against us, and it felt to me at the time like that was almost like you're already in like desperation calling mode if you're leaning on those kind of tactics and strategies. I mean, that's kind of, I guess, could be just a difference in philosophy, but yeah, I think they're just I don't know. They just don't seem to have the same level of teamwork that I've seen in the past. I think against us as well, Apex got caught off getting like entry'd maybe a couple times, like 5-6 seconds before the next portion of the attack was getting involved. They weren't trading super well. I think they just kind of got stuck in a weird place in this tournament, and maybe it was because of the quick turnaround of Apex coming back from his break that something just wasn't there in the preparation. But it felt to me like they're playing too much of like a gimmicky style of Counter-Strike round after round, which can be effective if you're mixing it in with different Counter-Strike. But when it is those kind of gimmicky things each and every time, like eventually like teams are going to be able to read that's coming, and teams are going to scout it, and they're going to say, oh, they're running this strategy a whole shit ton. Those are easy strategies to stop if you kind of expect it to be coming. The surprise factor is what really gets you. But when you're doing it too much, there's no longer a surprise factor when you're playing against it. So for us, that was kind of the easiest part about playing Vitality, especially on Mirage. It got to that point.
I think we just leave it there. Just knock it on the head there. This video was kindly supported by Lager15, Pronogo, Andrew, Animosity, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Jensen Goh, Hades, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, Dean Tanglis, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask some sort of a topic or suggest the guest for some upcoming content I have? Do you want to know something in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers, see who the next guests are for my content? Or maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy audio discussions with me? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.